The House floor was electric, tense enough to feel in your chest. Every seat was filled, cameras rolling, eyes locked on the podium where Speaker Mike Johnson stood like a man about to make a statement. His Louisiana drawl cut through the chamber. "The gentlewoman from Texas," he began, his voice smooth but edged with contempt, "seems to think she knows more about constitutional law than those of us who actually studied it. Perhaps she should spend less time creating viral moments and more time learning how government actually works." It wasn't just a jab, it was an ambush. A public attempt to humiliate Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett in front of the entire nation. Some gasped, others smirked. Every camera zoomed in, but Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't stammer or look down. She just adjusted her microphone and smiled. Not a nervous smile, a dangerous one, the kind that says, "You just made the biggest mistake of your political career." And what happened over the next 3 minutes would shift the entire mood of the U.S. House of Representatives. Mike Johnson thought he was about to score political points. Instead, he walked right into a rhetorical ambush, one that would make even his Republican colleagues whisper later. He shouldn't have gone after her. The player's Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House. At 52, he's supposed to be one of the most powerful men in Washington. A constitutional lawyer from Louisiana, Johnson made his name fighting culture war cases, religious freedom, traditional marriage, and conservative causes. But his rise was strange, almost accidental. He wasn't a powerhouse legislator. He wasn't a deal maker. He became Speaker only because every other Republican candidate failed. He wasn't the first choice. He was the last option left standing, and that insecurity shows. Constantly balancing a razor-thin majority, under pressure from the far right, Johnson's biggest weakness is the need to prove he's in control. Which is why he took the bait that day. Jasmine Crockett, on the other hand, was already a force of nature. A 43-year-old civil rights attorney from Texas, she'd gone viral for dismantling political opponents with surgical precision. She wasn't just a politician, she was a trial lawyer. 15 years in the courtroom had made her fearless. She knew how to cross-examine, how to control the narrative, and how to make juries, or in this case, the American public, feel every word. Before Congress, she fought for voting rights, defended the poor, and took on government overreach. So when Johnson tried to question her understanding of the Constitution, he was walking into the lion's den. The setting, a battle over the budget, the showdown began during a heated debate on a bill to keep the government open, a continuing resolution. Republicans had packed it with deep cuts to health care, nutrition programs, and reproductive rights. Democrats saw it as an attack on working families. Jasmine Crockett took the floor, armed with receipts. "Mr. Speaker," she began, her tone calm but commanding, "I rise today to oppose this bill because it is a betrayal of American families. It's being sold as responsible governance. But page by page, it's a blueprint for hardship." She lifted the thick stack of papers. Page 47, Cuts to WIC, the program that feeds pregnant women and children. Page 63, Medicaid reductions that'll gut state health care. Page 89, restrictions on family planning that will close clinics across America. Republicans shifted in their seats. They didn't like hearing their bill read back to them, but Crockett wasn't done. "What concerns me most," she continued, "is the hypocrisy. Some of my colleagues love to talk about fiscal responsibility, but they protect subsidies and tax breaks in their own districts. They'll cut food for poor families, but not corporate welfare." The Democratic side chuckled quietly. The Republican side bristled. Round 2, Johnson strikes back. Johnson leaned into the mic. "The gentlewoman will confine her remarks to the substance of the bill and avoid characterizing the motives of other members. It was meant to intimidate." A warning shot, but Crockett didn't blink. "Mr. Speaker," she replied smoothly, "I am speaking to the substance of the bill. If the facts make some members uncomfortable, perhaps they should reconsider their vote." The room erupted in murmurs. Even Democrats laughed. Johnson's jaw tightened. He'd just been publicly checked by the very woman he tried to humiliate. Round 3. The facts cut. Deeper Crockett pressed on. "Let's talk about who this bill helps and who it hurts. Because despite all the talk about responsibility, this bill cuts $28 billion from social programs, while saving corporations $40 billion in taxes." She held up a chart from the Congressional Budget Office. So we're taking money from children and giving it to corporations that are already making record profits. Tell me again how that's fiscal responsibility. Now, Republicans were visibly angry. One shouted, "Point of order!" Johnson quickly responded, siding with his member. "The gentlewoman is mischaracterizing the bill." I asked that her remarks be stricken from the record. That was serious. If Johnson agreed, Crockett's entire speech would be erased. He hesitated. Everyone watched. Then, cautious of the optics, he backed off. The gentlewoman may continue, but she must confine herself to policy. Round 4. The knockout Jasmine adjusted her mic again. "Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said, I'm discussing policy. I've read this bill line by line. I've argued in federal courts for over a decade. I've defended the Constitution while some people were just talking about it." The chamber went silent. "And let me be clear," she added, her voice rising. "When you vote to cut health care, cut food programs, and slash education, you're not defending fiscal responsibility. You're defending cruelty, and history will remember it." The room froze. Even Republicans stopped shuffling their papers. Mike Johnson, once towering behind the podium, suddenly looked very small. 3 minutes. That's all it took for Jasmine Crockett to turn a public attack into a masterclass in composure, intelligence, and courage. When the clip hit social media, it exploded. Millions watched. And just like that, the woman Johnson tried to silence became the voice everyone wanted to hear. In Washington, respect isn't given, it's earned. And that day, Jasmine Crockett didn't just earn it. She commanded it. The day Jasmine Crockett silenced the speaker. The House chamber was tense. Speaker Mike Johnson leaned over the podium, frustration etched across his face. His Louisiana drawl filled the air. "The gentlewoman from Texas seems to think she knows more about constitutional law than those of us who actually studied it." The words dripped with condescension. It wasn't a procedural correction, it was an insult. Personal, calculated, and everyone knew it. The room went still. Cameras zoomed in. Democrats exchanged stunned glances. Even a few Republicans looked uneasy. Johnson continued, voice rising. "Perhaps she should spend less time creating viral moments and more time learning how government actually works." He smirked, thinking he'd just scored an easy win. But what came next would turn into one of the most devastating congressional comebacks in modern history. The smile before the storm Jasmine Crockett didn't look shaken. She simply adjusted her microphone and smiled, calm, dangerous, deliberate. The kind of smile that said, "You just picked the wrong fight." "Mr. Speaker," she began evenly, "I'd like to respond to your characterization of my credentials. May I continue with my time?" The Democratic member beside her immediately said, "The gentlewoman may continue." And at that moment, everyone in the chamber felt it. Mike Johnson had taken the bait. The credentials check. "You mentioned you studied constitutional law," Jasmine said, voice steady. "So let's compare." She held up a sheet of paper. She'd come prepared. "You graduated from LSU Law and worked for the Alliance Defending Freedom." "That's fine legal work." She paused, then added, "I graduated from the University of Houston Law Center. I've spent over 15 years as a civil rights attorney, defending clients in federal, state, and appellate courts. I've argued cases involving the First, Fourth, and 14th Amendments. Actual constitutional law, not talking points." The silence was deafening. "So, with all due respect, when it comes to practical application of constitutional law, not theory, I'm more than qualified. In fact, I'd argue my experience is more extensive than yours. You could practically hear the collective intake of breath." Johnson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The constitutional lesson Crockett wasn't done. She pulled out a small booklet, a pocket constitution. "You reminded me this house has 230 years of tradition." "True, but Article 1, Section 5 of the Constitution gives Congress power to make its own rules, as long as those rules comply with the Constitution itself." She looked him dead in the eye. The First Amendment protects political speech. As a member of Congress, I not only have the right but the duty to speak about legislation and its impact. "You don't get to silence me because my arguments make you uncomfortable," Democrats nodded. Even some Republicans couldn't hide their admiration. Jasmine Crockett was schooling the speaker, live on national television. The personal counterattack. You also accused me of caring more about social media than substance, she continued. Yes, my speeches go viral, because I explain what bills actually do. That's not performance. That's transparency. Maybe if more members did the same, Americans would have more faith in Congress. Applause broke out before Johnson slammed his gavel for order. But the damage was done. As for learning how government works, Jasmine added, you've been Speaker less than a year. You've struggled to pass basic legislation and relied on Democrats to avoid shutdowns. So perhaps, before questioning my understanding, you should reflect on your own leadership. The chamber fell silent. Johnson's face flushed red. He looked down. No words left. The knockout. And finally, Mr. Speaker, Jasmine said, her voice ringing with conviction, this isn't just about me. Women of color in Congress are too often dismissed as emotional or unqualified, but when white men speak passionately, they're called principled. That double standard ends today. She leaned forward, voice clear and unshaken. I am not too emotional. I am not unqualified. I am here because the people of Texas's 30th District elected me, and I will speak for them whether it makes you comfortable or not. The room was frozen. Mike Johnson opened his mouth, and nothing came out. The gentlewoman's time has expired, he finally muttered. But everyone knew, time or not. Jasmine Crockett had just owned the moment. Within minutes, the clip exploded online. Crockett destroys the Speaker trended worldwide. Legal experts praised her precision. Journalists called it a masterclass in composure and constitutional clarity. And somewhere in that chamber, Mike Johnson realized this wasn't his victory. It was Jasmine Crockett's legacy moment. Jasmine Crockett versus Mike Johnson. The showdown that shook Congress. It started as just another heated debate on the House floor, until Speaker Mike Johnson decided to make it personal. With a smirk, he leaned over the mic and said, the gentlewoman from Texas seems to think she knows more about constitutional law than those of us who actually studied it. That single line changed everything. The room froze. Members exchanged wide-eyed looks. Even some Republicans looked uneasy, but Representative Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She smiled, calm, confident, and ready. Mr. Speaker, she began, since you brought up credentials, let's talk about them. The mic drop moment Crockett laid it out, fact by fact. She reminded the Speaker, and the entire country, that Article 1, Section 5 of the Constitution gives Congress the power to set its own rules. But those rules must still respect the First Amendment. Her precision impressed even legal heavyweights. Professor Erwin Chemerinsky, one of the nation's top constitutional scholars, told CNN, Representative Crockett's analysis was spot on. What impressed me most was how quickly she applied constitutional principles under pressure. That's not talking points, and that's mastery. The National Bar Association issued a statement praising her articulate defense of constitutional law and her refusal to be silenced by procedural abuse. And former federal judge Nancy Gertner summed it up perfectly. Speaker Johnson learned a rule every trial lawyer knows: never challenge someone's credentials unless you're sure yours are stronger. Crockett didn't just respond, and she built her argument like a case, step by step, and her closing statement left no room for rebuttal. The fallout Johnson's team scrambled for damage control. Their first statement claimed he was simply reminding members to follow decorum. But social media wasn't buying it. He literally said she doesn't understand how government works. One user wrote, "That's not decorum, that's disrespect." Their second attempt was softer. The Speaker respects all members and their contributions. Too late. The internet had already chosen sides, and Crockett won in a landslide. When reporters pressed Johnson, "Do you regret questioning her credentials?" he dodged, muttering about focusing on legislation. That only made it worse. He looked weak, evasive, and rattled. The ripple effect inside Congress. The moment shifted dynamics. Democrats were energized. Leader Hakeem Jeffries praised Crockett's intelligence, courage, and constitutional knowledge. AOC tweeted, "This is what happens when you try to silence women of color." Jasmine Crockett doesn't just fight back, she educates while fighting back. Even moderate Republicans privately admitted she was right. One told The Hill Mike made it personal and got burned. Now that is the story, not the bill. After that, Johnson's tone changed. He became more cautious, more formal. No more offhand remarks from the speaker's chair. Crockett had, quite literally, changed how he did his job. The rise of Jasmine Crockett. For Crockett, the moment was transformational. Her campaign raised over $3 million in a single week, with donors writing, "Thank you for standing up to bullies." She was invited on every major network, podcast, and political show. Law schools called. Bar associations honored her. She'd gone from rising star to national powerhouse, a symbol of confidence, intellect, and calm under fire, as one columnist wrote. Crockett didn't just win the argument, she redefined what power looks like in Congress. The lesson, the Crockett-Johnson clash, taught Washington a few truths: expertise matters. Knowledge still beats noise, preparation wins. She didn't stumble. She strategized. Titles don't guarantee respect. Competence does. Social media is the new equalizer. The speaker had the gavel. Crockett had the internet, and the internet won. Months later, the phrase, "Don't pull a Mike Johnson," became political slang for don't pick a fight you can't win. Crockett remains one of the most respected and feared debaters in Congress. And Johnson? He learned the hard way. When you challenge Jasmine Crockett, you'd better come armed with more than a title, because she's always armed with the truth. What a showdown. If you believe in standing up for truth and expertise, smash that like button. Subscribe for more powerful stories, political takedowns, and inspiring voices that speak truth to power. Hit the bell so you never miss when the next moment goes viral.